Why is God silent when you need Him most? Why does heaven grow quiet right before your breakthrough? It's not a coincidence. It's a spiritual pattern. And if you don't recognize it, you'll misinterpret the silence as abandonment instead of preparation. You cry out, but there's no answer. You fast, pray, seek, worship, but the heavens feel like iron, and your spirit starts to wonder if God has left the room. But what if I told you this silence isn't punishment, it's positioning? What if God's silence is not His absence but His strategy? Because silence is the womb of transformation. When God is quiet, He is working beneath the surface, rearranging things in the unseen, setting up what your eyes have not yet seen, but what your faith is being forced to believe. That's why Isaiah 45:15 says, "Truly you are a God who hides Himself, because His silence is never without purpose." You think you're stuck, but God is staging something. You feel overlooked, but heaven is orchestrating things in your favor. Romans 8:28 isn't just a verse, it's a strategy. All things work together for good, even the things you don't understand, even the moments when God won't say a word. Because the silence is not denial, it is divine tension. It is the holy space between promise and fulfillment, where your flesh dies and your spirit rises. Like Jesus in the tomb, silent, still, but never absent. Resurrection was coming, but first there had to be a stillness so deep it offended logic. That's what the enemy doesn't want you to realize, that divine silence is not a grave, it's a garden. Something is growing inside you even when it feels like everything around you is dying. That depression, that delay, that confusion, those aren't signs of defeat, they're contractions of birth. Romans 8:22 reminds us that all of creation is groaning as in childbirth. And so are you. Because right before breakthrough, the pain increases, the pressure rises, and heaven goes quiet. Not because you're abandoned, but because you're about to give birth to something hell cannot stop. That's why the enemy attacks your mind so violently in the silence. Because when God stops speaking, the devil starts whispering. He tries to fill the void with lies, planting thoughts like, "You're forgotten, you've missed it, you're not chosen." But those aren't divine echoes. They're demonic counterfeits. Jesus said in John 10:27, "My sheep hear my voice." But the silence doesn't mean you're not His. It means He's training you to recognize Him without noise. The silence teaches you to discern God's presence by presence, not performance. To walk by faith, not by feeling. 2 Corinthians 5:7 says we walk by faith, not by sight, and sometimes not even by sound. That's where many fall, because silence exposes what your faith is rooted in. Do you believe God only when He's talking? Or do you trust Him even when He's quiet? Real faith isn't built in revival. It's built in the wilderness. It's in the silence that your identity is forged. Your calling is refined, and your idols are shattered. Because silence will confront your dependency on affirmation, on prophecy, on public applause, and force you to answer this. Is Jesus still enough when you hear nothing at all? This is where God matures you, not through noise, but through nuance. You're not just waiting, you're being rebuilt. Silence becomes the furnace where surface-level faith burns away, and what remains is unshakable. This is what Job meant when he said, "Though He slay me, yet will I trust in Him." Job 13:15. God may not be speaking, but He's still sovereign. He may be hidden, but He's still holy. In the silence, He's watching, not to punish you, but to prove you, like a goldsmith watches fire refine gold, not intervening until the impurities rise and your identity in Him shines. This is the wilderness between Egypt and Canaan, between bondage and breakthrough. and it is holy ground. Do not mistake God's silence for absence. This is the tension of trust. And the closer you get to destiny, the quieter he becomes. Not to distance himself, but to develop something deeper in you. Look at Abraham. God promised him a son and then stayed silent for years. Look at Joseph. Dreams, then dungeons, and no voice of God in between. Look at Jesus, baptized in glory, then driven into the wilderness, where for 40 days there was no open heaven, only wild beasts and temptation. And yet that silence was strategy. That silence was preparation. The next time Jesus showed up in public, demons trembled. That's what's happening in you. God is forming something so strong, so holy, so untouchable, he has to seal it in silence before he releases it in glory. Because when he finally speaks again, it won't be a whisper, it will be a breakthrough. Heaven's quiet is never passive. It's prophetic. It's the pause before the sound of walls falling down. It's the hush before chains shatter. It's the stillness before the storm gets silenced by one word. Peace, be still. But to get there, you must walk through the weight of unconfirmed faith. Faith that keeps showing up to pray when heaven doesn't reply. Faith that keeps worshiping when there's no goosebumps. Faith that refuses to quit even when God seems to have gone silent. That is holy defiance. That is dangerous obedience. That is the kind of faith the devil cannot decode and hell cannot defeat. Because that's where oil is born, in crushing. That's where mantles are released, in waiting. That's where real anointing flows, not in public platforms, but in private silence. So if you're in a season where God is quiet, don't panic. Don't assume he's left. Instead ask, what is he building inside me that requires silence to take root? Because silence is how God hides the seed from the enemy. He's not ignoring you. He's incubating you. You are not forgotten. You are being fortified. And when God finally speaks again, the sound will carry authority that silence forged. So let me speak to the version of you that's been doubting in the silence, the version of you that's been quietly wondering if you missed it, if he changed his mind, if you're still chosen. The answer is yes. Yes, you are still chosen. Yes, the calling still stands. Yes, the assignment still matters. Heaven has not gone silent because you're rejected. Heaven has gone silent because you are dangerous. You are carrying something the devil can't stop but is trying to silence before it speaks. The enemy can't destroy the voice of God, so he attacks your confidence in it. He floods your mind with noise in the absence of clarity, hoping you'll abort the promise before it breathes. But what he didn't count on was your endurance. He didn't expect you to still be standing, still praying, still pressing, still hoping, still showing up even when you feel nothing. And that is where you win. That is where the breakthrough begins. Not when the battle is over, but when your posture says, I believe, even while the room is quiet. That's where mountains move. That's where devils tremble. That's where chains start to crack. Because your persistence in silence is a threat to darkness. Every time you choose to worship in a whisper, every time you read the word without a revelation, every time you get back up when you feel nothing but dust, hell loses ground. And here's the truth most never realize. The silence wasn't just about preparing the breakthrough. It was about preparing you. You are the breakthrough. What God is doing in you is bigger than what you've been asking him to do for you. You didn't lose his voice. You found your own. The fire that should have burned you is now burning through you. The pain that should have stopped you is now preaching for you. You've been looking for the answer, but God has been making you the answer. So don't waste the silence. Let it finish its work. Let it purify your motives, sharpen your hearing, strip your idols, and anchor your identity. Not in results, but in the Redeemer. Because when you come out of this, you won't just have survived, you'll be carrying resurrection power. Like Jesus walked out of the grave wrapped in glory, you too will emerge from this silence, wrapped in a power no platform can manufacture. And when God speaks again, you will know it wasn't just a word, it was a weapon, a release, a roar. So until then, stay still, stay ready, stay faithful. The silence is almost over. Your spirit knows it, heaven knows it, hell fears it, because when God breaks the silence, nothing stays the same.